Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? We're back working on the Mercedes, and this video is going to be a first video in a series of videos on how you can diagnose problems with your steering angle sensor, your lateral acceleration sensor, your yaw rate sensor, and also your ESP or traction control module. So as you may remember, on this 2001 Mercedes ML430, our traction or ESP light is on, our brake lights are on, and we also hear beeping while driving. And when we scan our traction control module for codes, we got the codes you see here. We're going to ignore the S11 or the brake fluid indicator switch code for now and concentrate on these four codes. We got the steering angle sensor code, we got our ESP control unit, we got a yaw rate sensor, and the lateral acceleration sensor. Now in this video, we'll concentrate on how you can diagnose problems with the steering angle sensor, and then in the consecutive videos, we'll concentrate on the other sensors and the control module. All right, so just to get this out of the way, when you get this code for the steering angle sensor, it says it's not initialized, that doesn't necessarily mean the steering angle sensor is bad. So whenever you replace your battery or disrupt current going to the steering angle sensor, you need to reinitialize or initialize your steering angle sensor. There's two ways to do it on these cars. First way is to get in the car, turn on the engine, and then turn the steering wheel all the way to the right, and then all the way to the left, waiting 2 seconds at each lock. You do that twice, then return the steering wheel back to the center, and then you should have initialize your steering angle sensor if everything is working correctly. The second way to do it is to simply get in the car, drive it in a straight line for doing 15 to 25 miles per hour for a block or two, and that initializes your steering angle sensor as well. But for the sake of this video, we'll concentrate on how you can diagnose problems with the steering angle sensor regardless of whether you have that code or other codes regarding your steering angle sensor. So first up, you need to know how the steering angle sensor works. So usually the steering angle sensor is mounted on your steering column. So the steering angle sensor on this car is mounted lower on the steering column, just about there. And other cars, it might be higher or just right behind your steering wheel. So assuming this is your steering column, and there's no other way to show you this, and we're gonna try to do it without laughing. Here's your steering shaft attached to your steering wheel up top, goes through the steering column, your steering angle. Got a Beavis and Butthead moment. Get out of our system. Through the steering column, your steering, as you turn the steering wheel, the steering angle sensor, the resistance inside the steering angle sensor changes, which in turn will send a varying signal in terms of varying voltage back to your ESP or traction control module. The traction control, using that info along with other info we receive from the other sensors we're going to cover later on, tries to make sure that you keep traction while driving down the road. Didn't think I was going to be able to pull that off. We did it. Now it greatly helps if you have a scanner capable of reading live data to try to diagnose problems with the steering angle sensor. But you don't necessarily need one of these, but I'll show you how you use these first, and then after this I'll show you how you can use a multimeter to diagnose problems with the steering angle sensor as well. Alright, so first things first, you get in your car and make sure your steering wheel is turned to the straight ahead position. And then you come outside and double check and make sure both of your wheels are also pointed straight ahead and your car is not out of alignment. Because if your front wheels are out of alignment and when you go in a straight line, you have to slightly tilt the steering wheel to one way or the other, the steering angle sensor, if working correctly, is going to send the voltage to your traction control module saying you're going around a curve or a turn. Now the traction control module, since it also receives signals from the other sensors saying no, you're not going around a turn, then it can potentially throw a code for your steering angle sensor or the other sensors. All the while, you simply need a front end alignment. So after you check those, you go to the live data section on your scanner. If you have the option of graphs, you go to graphs, find your steering angle sensor, throw that on there. And as you can see, we're at positive 2.5 now. You obviously want to be as close to zero as possible, but a lot of times it's pretty hard to get the steering wheel to be exactly straight ahead and this showing at 0 degrees. But if you're within 2.5 or even 5, you should be okay. And then you want to get in the car, turn on the engine, and then slowly start to turn the steering wheel in one direction or the other. As you turn the steering wheel, you want to turn it, let's say, 90 degrees, and then check on here and make sure you're at 90 or very close to it. Turn it another 90 degrees, so on and so forth, until you get all the way to the lock on whatever direction you're turning. Now, again, this should go on smoothly. There should be no spikes as you're turning it, and then no drop-offs. If you see any of those, that means there's a dead spot on the sensor. You need to replace that sensor. So we're going to turn it to the right first. So here we should be at just about 90 degrees right now. There. Turn it another 90. We're at 180. Yeah, right on. Another should be 270. Yep, close to 270. Another one. Yep, just gonna keep on going. Make sure there's no spikes or drop off. Yeah, we're all the way to the right. Now we're gonna slowly turn back. Right now we're in the straight ahead position. We're at positive 2.5. We're gonna go all the way to the left. We're gonna go again slowly. We should be coming up at 90. And we're all the way to the left. Again, no drop-offs and no spikes. So this looks good so far. All right, so that checked out on this car, but if you're doing this on your car and, as you're turning the steering wheel, the numbers don't add up to the degrees they're supposed to be, or, you see spikes or drop-offs as you're turning the steering wheel, then that likely means that both ground and power are present at the steering angle sensor connector, and more than likely the internal parts of the sensor are bad, and you need to replace it. Now, on the other hand, if you just see 0, or if you see just one number that stays constant, it doesn't matter which direction you turn the steering wheel, that could also mean that the sensor is bad, but it could also mean that there's a problem with power or ground getting to the sensor. All right, so the easiest place to check for power and ground is going to be to start to check for power at your fuse box. Now, you should really get a wiring diagram, especially if you're going to be doing this with a multimeter that I'm going to show you later on, because all steering angle sensors work slightly differently, and a wiring diagram will tell you how each angle sensor works. Let me show you the one for this car. All right, so here's a wiring diagram for this car. Here's our steering angle sensor. As you can see, it's got 4 wires going to it. This one right here, this tan or brown one, it's ground. It looks like it shares a ground with these 2 other components, the ESP off switch and also the parking brake switch. Then it's got a signal wire here, pin number 4 on its connector, which is a green one. I'm going to try to highlight this in yellow. And if you follow that, you can see it comes up here and goes to our ESP control module, pin number 16, and this is a green wire on connector number 1. So there's our ground, there's our signal wire, and then if we follow the other 2 wires, the blue and red wires, let's highlight these guys. If we go up, they go to our fuse and relay box. Both of them carry voltage or power to our steering angle sensor. One of them is hot in run or start, that's fuse number 2, 15 amp fuse. The other one is hot at all times. That's fuse number 13, 10 amps. All right, so on this car, we have our ground, obviously. Then we have 1 signal wire going to the traction control module, and then we have 2 hot wires. One at all times, the other one only when the key is in the on or start position. Now, this is set up this way, I believe, because the steering angle sensor on this car has a microchip inside of it. So the one that's hot at all times is there so that stays running and basically keeps track of your steering angle when you turn the car off. Now, other cars, this could be set up differently, of course. You could have, a ground, a signal, and a 5-volt reference coming from the traction control module to the steering angle sensor, or you could have a ground and a power and also 2 wires on a CAN network sending information through the CAN network back to your traction control module. All right, so next we're going to try to find fuse number 22 and 13. Get these guys loose, remove this cover. Now we're lucky since we got this diagram that's going to tell us exactly where fuse number 22 and 13 are. If you don't have one of these, you always need to go back to the repair manual. Or in the case of this Mercedes, I guess all the fuses are actually numbered on the fuse box, as you hopefully can see. So next you want to grab your test light connected to the battery negative or a good ground on the chassis, and you're going to want to use a test light with an incandescent light bulb. So you go to number 10 and test both sides of the fuse. Make sure it's nice and bright. So number 10 was the one that's hot at all times. To test number 22, which is going to be this guy, you need to turn the key to the on position. So we'll do that and then come back and test number 22. As you can see, we got power on one side and power on the other side as well. So these fuses are good. All right, so in the case for this car, if we had a code for the steering angle sensor or on the graph, our steering angle sensor was working erratically, it's looking more and more likely that it's the sensor itself. But we need to verify. We need to verify power and ground at the sensor and also test the signal wire as well. So the next step is to actually go to the sensor, remove the connector from the sensor. So yeah, you go to your steering angle sensor, you remove the connector. Ours is going to be a 4-pin connector, and then with your test light connected to battery negative, you again test these two wires that should be carrying battery voltage to the sensor. If that checks out, then you connect your test light to battery positive, and then you test this tan or brown wire that should have ground. Now, in order to test the signal wire, you should switch over from a incandescent test light to an LED test light, because those obviously draw a lot less amps. And then at the connector with your LED test light attached to battery positive, you touch pin number 4 in our case, which is the signal wire, and then send basically 12 volts to the ESP Control module. And then while you do this, you look at the scanner and the live data and you read the degrees. It should max out the degrees in one direction or the other, negative 500 something in our case, or positive 500 something, or something along those lines. If that happens, that means that the wire is good. Also, the module can read the signal from this wire, from this connector to itself as well. All right, so next, let's say you don't have one of these scanners capable of reading live data from your traction control module. If that's the case, you need to start actually checking for power. So you go to your fuse box, check for power like we just did. And then from there, you have two options. You can either get to the connector for your steering angle sensor, or if it's easier, you can also go to the traction control module. For us, it's easier to go to the module since it's right here, right underneath this cover that's held in by about 3 Torx screws, if I'm not mistaken. So you'll need a T20 Torx bit for these guys. There's actually 5 of them. There's 2 more here. Get this guy out of the way. All right, so next we need to find where our signal wire goes. Again, it goes to pin number 16, connector number 1 on our ESP control module. And you guessed it, after we find our wire or the pin on the control module, we back probe it with our multimeter. The only problem is, as I mentioned earlier, the steering angle sensor has a microprocessor in it, so it doesn't send varying voltage exactly, but rather signal frequencies back to the computer. So you get voltage, you can kind of verify that the wire integrity is probably good, but you can't exactly diagnose it like you could a sensor where it was just mechanical. Like those sensors would get, let's say, 5 volt reference voltage, and then with the wheels straight ahead, you would get 2.5 volts, and then as you turn it one way, that 2.5 volts would go up towards 5, and then if you were to turn it the other way, that 2.5 volt would decrease and go towards 0. On these, you kind of just see the voltage. I'm going to turn the steering wheel. The voltage changes, but it doesn't change. It doesn't say that what it's exactly supposed to be. It doesn't give you a definitive answer whether the sensor is good or not. You just verify that voltage gets through from the sensor to the control module. There, we're going to turn it to the right. Now, voltage goes up and down a little bit, I'm sure, but that's just the frequency. That's just the lows and highs of the frequency. Now we're all the way to the right. Now we're just going to turn all the way to the left. So that's all the way to the left. Now we're just going to go back towards the center. And there. So after this procedure, if you don't see voltage up here, or if the voltage doesn't change, it doesn't move one way or the other as you turn the steering wheel, then you need to go to the connector to the steering angle sensor, check for power and ground there. Also send the voltage with an LED test light up the signal wire. Make sure you can see it up here with your multimeter. The only problem is the weakness of this procedure is that the control module you cannot say whether the control module is reading or interpreting the signal it's receiving, because you don't have the scanner capable of getting the live data from that module. But if everything checks out, the odds are really good that it's a sensor, but it's not 100%, unfortunately. But yeah, I hope this video helped you out there. If it's too complicated, went over your head, you have questions, leave them in the comment section. If you see your question, give it a thumbs up so it moves up and I can see it. I'll try to answer them or make a video response to it. So yeah, I hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Hit the bell notification, leave comments again in the description box. Check out my other videos in the suggestion box, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.